Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. This is Ramon Mejia here. We're here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This is episode number 85 of the podcast, and this week I have 8 new LitRPG reviews just for you folks at home. This includes Rapture, Apocalypse Gate's author's cut book 1. We're actually comparing their 2 versions of this novel. Rapture, which is the author's cut, and then there's also the PG-16 version of it, and I'll tell you the difference between the two during the review. Also, this week we're reviewing Mira and Zoro, Stuck in a Game World, Vampire Wrath, and Incubus Issues, the LitRPG Fantasy Fun novel. That's all one title. Also, we're reviewing the Lewd Shadowmancer, a Concubine contract, a dark fantasy digital adventure. Also, it'll be Super Sales on Superheroes Book 2. And the Twilight Obelisk, Mirror World Book 4, and then the Gods of the Second World, LitRPG, the Weirdest Noob Book 3, and it's actually the final book in that series as well. And then it's going to be a Dungeon Soul Book 3, The Adventures on Brad, and last but not least, Infinite Assassins, Daggerland Online, Book 2 in that series. But of course, we're beginning our show though with LitRPG news. Okay, and in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with a wonderfully touching story. Dakota Crowd, friend of the podcast, recently had his first baby. Well, him and his wife. If you read his latest novel, Dungeon Calamity, see, here it is. You already know the name of his child. He's a character in the story, and also is also in the dedication, I believe. So go pick it up just for that if you haven't already read it. But if we want to give a big congratulations to Dakota and his wife on having a healthy baby girl, congratulations, man. Good stuff. Very good news in the LitRPG community for the week. So thanks, Ben. Okay, in other LitRPG news, there's also been a development in the trademark issue of LitRPG. It seems like the term LitRPG has actually gone through, and LaRons Kong is officially the trademark holder. People are feeling a variety of emotions about the situation. Some are very angry. Other people are very happy. Many people just don't care. And all those emotions and feelings are completely valid. Everybody has the right to feel what they feel. But I figured this is a legitimate news story, especially for the community. And I can already tell you some of the facts that have happened within the community. One of the bigger ones is the fact that the LitRPG Society has changed their name to RPG Gamelit Society. And this is not because anybody asked them to do so. Neither LaRons or anybody else has requested that they do so in any way, shape, or form. The group basically decided that they should change their name as a proactive step to avoid potential problems. And this is things that you're going to see for a lot of people. A lot of people are very sensitive to potential litigation or potential, whether it's going to be real or not. It's just the kind of like the anticipation of potential problems, they want to avoid it. And so they've already started to not say, oh, this is a LitRPG novel, or saying LitRPG in their particular story, because they feel like they're going to have to take it out eventually because somebody else holds the trademark. And whether or not that's the case, I don't know. I am not a prognosticator. I don't know the future. But LaRons Kong, I asked him for a statement on the particular issue, and this is what he said. He said, "Hello, everyone. LaRons here. I want to address the concerns about the trademark of LitRPG before the conversation escalates into unnecessary worries. First, a little history. I started attempting to trademark LitRPG back in 2016 as a way to help not only protect my ability to use a term, but also protect future authors' ability to do the same. My concern was that if someone trademarked it, they wouldn't allow others to use it or to work towards helping it grow as a genre. However, I realized after some personal attacks that this wasn't how it was being taken, and that others might have thought I intended to block other authors from helping the genre grow. This could not be farther from the truth. When my first attempt at obtaining a trademark failed, my lawyers who were under retainer let me know that there were still a few avenues that they would like to try before calling it quits, but that they were unaware if those attempts would work. Up until recently, I thought the trademark was dead in the water. My lawyer had made no progress and had left me feeling uncertain that it wasn't going to move forward, and I had no intention of continuing to pursue it after they finished exhausting their final attempts. But a few weeks ago, I received quite the surprise. My lawyer called and informed me that the trademark was moving forward. I wasn't sure how to feel about this, and I didn't really want to stir up any problems. I know some people have questioned how I could be unaware of the actions my lawyer recently took and allowed the trademark to go through. And honestly, it's pretty simple. Pretty simple answer. Lawyers work off a retainer at times, prepaid amounts to use as needed for the task given, which is the case here. And when they told me multiple times that it probably would not happen, I put it out of my mind and just waited for the process and the retainer to run its course. Now that I've explained history, I want to clarify what this means going forward. The trademark covers athletic apparel, shirts, pants, jackets, footwear, hats, etc., as well as use for a website featuring entertainment information, such as movies, TV, social media, books, ebooks, etc. The major concern I found is, will other LitRPG authors be able to use LitRPG to promote their books, describe their books, etc.? The simple answer is yes. I have no intention of pursuing royalties from other authors in the genre. I wanted to protect the trademark so that we could all work together to help it grow. What does the future hold now that LitRPG is a trademark? If you visit my website, litrpg.com/LitRPGbooks, you will find that I have featured what I refer to as the list, a page devoted to highlighting new releases and new authors in the LitRPG field without anything being given to me or being rewarded in any way. I've worked to ensure that all LitRPG authors, new and old, are connected to the awesome LitRPG audience. I try to keep this updated very regularly and have plans to help it grow moving forward. I have also, again, without recompense, have set up a beta reader list to help new authors hone their craft. This group, which I am so proud of, is literally the best and most supportive group on Facebook for new authors, in my opinion, and was made into such by literally thousands of hours of work by myself and my moderators, again with no recompense, but just because we love the genre. I feel that my track record and the track record of the moderators speak for itself. In addition to what has been done so far, I'm currently working on an update to the page, which allow authors to I may have missed or that are new to the genre to submit their information so that I can be sure to include it on the list and in other features. Another plan that I'm working to implement is helping all LitRPG authors to gain more social media exposure. As an extension of the list, I plan to post about new releases and new authors from my accounts, tagging the other authors to help increase their exposure to potential fans and readers. I encourage you all to participate in the same way. The more we can help the genre grow, the more we will all succeed. I feel that my efforts to promote all authors who joined the genre over the past 2 years should be evidence of my dedication to growing the genre as a whole. To some, LitRPG may be an enjoyable pastime, but to me, it is something that is wonderfully personal. I love LitRPG. I want to make sure that it always has room to grow. While I forgot about the trademark recently, the horrible and personal attacks that were directed at me by angry people just reminded me of the danger if the wrong person took the trademark. I'm sure many of you have seen the venomance some have been exhibiting, having had that target me in a very real and personal way. I assure you it is not pleasant. That the same people might obtain a trademark and then try to strong-arm new authors made me very uncomfortable. Though I was surprised by the fact that the trademark was ongoing, I am now happy I can keep it safe again. Again, I have no intention of interfering with others helping to grow the LitRPG genre. Just the opposite. I want to continue to help others bring attention to the genre we love. I hope this has brought clarity to the situation, but if you have any questions, feel free to contact me via the website at litrpg.com/support. So there you go. As always, he ends with, as always, I wish you all peace, love, and the perfect margarita, LaRons Kong. So there you go, folks. First, I'll have to say, I think my LitRPG recommendation list is better, but that's a side issue. But that is LaRons Statement. He, just to summarize, has no intention of stopping any author from using LitRPG in any way, shape, or form, or promoting it. And he, as a matter of fact, intends to promote it more. So there you go. That is one side. That is one statement from one side of that issue, the current trademark holder. On the other side, we have another statement from Magic Dome Books, who is a publisher of several Russian translated LitRPG series. So I'll read that one to you as kind of the other side of that coin. I think they did a good job of in summarizing their particular position as well. LaRons Kong has just registered the acronym LitRPG as a trademark. In order to clarify our position, we wish to state the following. The name LitRPG, as a description of a new genre of science fiction, was originally created by Dmitry Russ and I'm probably going to say this wrong, Mikhailov and Vasily Mahenko in 2012. Less than a little later, Dmitry Malkin, the science fiction editor of EKSMO Publishers, and the literary agent Alex Bubble created a book series counting almost 100 titles, which has entitled LitRPG. This term is then brought to the US by LitRPG fans who follow D. Russ and V. Mahenko's works in Russia. They have a link showing their particular proof, but it became widespread only after the translation and publication of the first books by D. Russ in July 18th, 2014, and V. Mahenko in April 20th, 2015 in English, whereas the first books by Akong was published November 20th, 2015. We have never planned to use our rights as LitRPG pioneers to have it registered as a trademark or do anything of the sort. Not only would that be unethical, but we simply can't think of it as something that belongs to anyone in particular. It belongs to all of us. For we will always support anyone who is willing to use the LitRPG term for his or her own purposes freely and unconditionally. This includes gathering proofs and making statements in court if necessary. Dear friends and colleagues, we all agree that Amazon should create an independent LitRPG category. We have asked for this many times, but I've only received a response which that such a step hasn't got enough support from readers. But we're certain that if we persevere with our efforts, at some point, Amazon will hear us, so please find some time to send a letter to their customer service in order to bring this subject back to the table. Signed, Magic Dome Books team. So there you go. That is another side of the coin. Magic Dome Books essentially says, they dispute that Alon was the first to use LitRPG, which is more of a technical issue, something you can dispute in court, or I should say in the process of the trademark claim issue. And again, I think those are two very good sides. One side is saying Alaron, he trademarked the name to protect it and to keep other people who might have misused it from using it. The other side of the coin saying that Alaron shouldn't have done it, basically, and maybe that he didn't have a right to. I understand both views. I do. I personally, I'm not particularly worried that Alaron is going to misuse the trademark rights in any way, shape, or form. Full disclosure, I consider myself a friend of Alaron Kong. I've been with the guy, talked, interviews several times, fairly regular communication. So, take my point of view with a grain of salt. I might be biased. Other people have called me completely naive in my point of view. And like I said, everyone has the right to their own opinions. One thing I do want to point out, of course, is that if you are angry, if you are upset about this, you have every right to feel whatever way you feel, whether it's going to be happy, sad, angry, livid, whatever the case is. But turn those emotions into something productive. There have been threats made against people. There have been people who have threatened to try to ruin people's careers because they don't agree with this particular issue. Those things, to me, go too far. There are processes in place, both legally and within the trademark website and situation that allow people to dispute a trademark. And please take those emotions if you dispute this and go there and actually dispute it. That's what the process is for. Get your voice heard if that's what you wish to do. If you want to oppose the registration of the trademark or petition to cancel the trademark registrations, we'll have a link in the show notes for you. You click on it, it'll take you to the uspto.gov website, and it'll have all links to email or to phone or to send mail for your proof against the trademark if that's what you wish to do. If you want to dispute it, again, there are ways for you to do so. And that is, to me, a much more productive use of your energy and emotions and time than, threatening other people, whether they agree with you or not, whatever the case is. So I definitely encourage you to go do so and use your energy that way if that's what you wish to do. Again, that's what that process is for. So there you go. So that's it for the LitRPG news. We're going to move on to novels that are currently out now, but I haven't had a chance to review. This includes Halcyon Rising, Breaking Grounds. Also out is City of Champions Online issue number 2 by Stuart Gross. Also out is The Way the Shaman books. I'm sorry, not The Way Shaman. Sorry, not to get your hopes up, folks. The Way of the Clan, book 7, World of Ladira. I'm not going to be reviewing it. I'm seriously super behind on that story, and I can't just skip to the latest novel. So it is what it is. But if you love the series, it's out. Book number 6 in the Realm of Archon series is out as well. The Starry Skies of Darkhan. Book 11 in the Amaryllis series, Empire Burning, is out as well. Definitely looking forward to reading that one. By Michael Chadwick. It is the last book in that series. The series is actually going to be finished with book 11. So, you can cry or be happy about it. I hear it has a good ending though. Also out is Continue Online, the complete series by Stephen Morse. He, from the podcast, had several interviews with the guy. You can check those on our website at LitRPGPodcast.com. But this is the complete, all 5 novels. I think it's like $9.99. It's also on Kindle Unlimited. So this is actually one of the LitRPG series that is complete. And it's also one that I regularly recommend as like being good science fiction in addition to being LitRPG. So go check it out if you haven't already done so. And in good news for me, Project Alpha, my latest novel, is also out as well as of the recording of this particular podcast. The physical copy has been uploaded. Should be out pretty soon. The audiobook version of it is in production as well. So hopefully that'll come out within, several weeks from now. And I'll just read the author's description if you want to listen to it, but I love the cover art personally. Really nice. Anthony Tunico is just an average guy looking forward to his first day of college. Unfortunately, he gets lost on the huge campus, and when he follows a hot girl to what he thinks may be his first class, he's accidentally introduced to a new world full of action and adventure, a world that exists in parallel with our own, the system. Now Anthony's getting new skills for doing everyday tasks, gaining levels from fighting monsters, and experiencing adventures he never thought possible. Not everyone is happy to see someone like Anthony with these new powers, and someone is willing to do whatever it takes to stop him from using them, including murder. Will Anthony be able to handle these strange powers, or will his enemies win and force him back to his normal, boring life? So that is it. I do put Project Alpha is a lit RPG novel in my description because I believe I have the right to do so. So that kind of summarizes my point on the other thing. We'll link in the show notes to it if you want to go check it out. I appreciate any support you guys give. If you do read it, go give it a review. It's really important for new authors or for indie authors like us to get reviews, especially in the early days of the book. That way Amazon algorithms will show it to more people, and more people can get a chance to read the stories we love to write. So there you go. Okay. Out in new LitRPG audiobooks, we have Speedrunner, Tower of Babel, Book 1 is out as an audiobook performed by Vikas Adam. A lot of people love Vikas's voice, so good on there. Also, the First Player Book 1 from Andrew Novak, read by Troy Durham, is also out as an audiobook. Black Hat, which is the second book in the Afterlife Online series, is also out as a audiobook read by Justin Thomas James. And then The Eternal Awakening World of Game Book 1 is out as an audiobook. It is read by Guy Williams. And then last but not least, this one actually popped up pretty new. Unexplored Into the Wildwood by Laura Brannon is out as an audiobook. So all kinds of good. Remember with this last one though, there are graphic sex scenes. So just be aware of that. We'll have in the show notes links to all the ebook versions, our reviews for the ebook versions of all these novels. So if you're not sure remember what they were about, you can go check those out. Okay, now to upcoming LitRPG. This is just where I read off the upcoming stories that I've listed that are going to come out soon. There aren't a lot. Like, we're running out of stories, honestly. So it's not a very long list this time. December the 13th, Desert Storm Turning Online, Book 3 is going to be out. Again, December the 13th. On the 21st of December, it'll be Depths of Camelin, a LitRPG adventure. That's Book 2 in the Camelin Realms series. On the 26th of December, right after Christmas, it's going to be the Camelot Defiant in Arthurian LitRPG. This is going to be Camelot LitRPG Book 4 by Galen Wolfe. Also sometime in December, it's unknown, The Dungeon Burden, Slime Dungeon Chronicles Book 4 is supposed to be out at some point. The author told me originally he planned to put it out about the 1st. It's well past that, so I'm not sure when it's going to be popping up, but I'm sure he's going to get it done as soon as possible. We're all waiting on Book 7 for the Chaos Seed series. It'll be out in December at some point, we hope. Also, new to the list is January the 5th. It's going to be Press Start by Kayla Levon. This is her first LitRPG novel. She sent an email to the podcast letting us know that she plans to put it out on, again, January the 15th, January the 5th. There is not going to be a pre-order, though, so there you go. Nice cover art, though. On the 17th of January, it's going to be the third book in the Dark Herbalist series, The Trap for the Potent Heat. And then the last but not least, January 24th, 2018 is going to be The Reaper, the Narrow Book 3. So there we go, folks. Those are all the stuff that's coming up. Now on to new releases and reviews. Okay, and new releases and reviews, folks. We're going to begin with Apocalypse Gates by Daniel Schienehofen, Book 1, Rapture. So there you go. Again, there are actually two versions of this novel. I thought this was very innovative on the author's part. One is completely uncensored. That's the picture you see currently. It's called the author's cut. There is also an edition called the PG-16 edition. Now, the difference between the two is that the PG-16 does not have the graphic sex scenes that the author's cut does. So if you're not into sex in your novels, graphic-wise, just go with the PG-16 version. There's still going to be forewarning and cursing and sex references in that version, but none of the graphic sex scenes. It goes fade to black for all those in the PG-16 version. In the author's cut, those are some very steamy scenes. So just be aware of that going into your decision as to which version you should pick up. Okay, I'll read you the author's description. Alvin woke in a room that was not his to discover that he had died and his brain had been bargained off cheaply to pay off someone else's debt. It did not sit well with him. It didn't surprise him that even in death people were still using him for their own purposes. He had never exactly been a good guy, but everyone had their breaking point, and he had found his. The bastards in charge had uploaded his mind into a virtual death game. The whole world can now pay to see him play and probably die. Alvin questioned whether he was really a bad guy, if that is how they wanted to treat him. Regardless, he was not about to wait for death to come to him. He would kick open the damn apocalypse gates and see about crushing everything that has challenged him. It was time to make the world aware that he was done with pretending to be nice. Welcome to Apocalypse Gates. Okay, so there we go. And the author does give a very fair warning that this version, the author's cut, has very graphic sex scenes, including gore, death, drug use, graphic sex, and of course cursing galore. So there you go, heads up. Full disclosure, the author gave me an advance copy for review. I purchased both of the versions when they were released. So there you go. I've already forewarned, but the difference between the two. Okay, on to the review. The first 30% of the novel is probably my favorite part of this thing. You get an almost episodic experience with the zombie apocalypse as the main character goes on a variety of missions. Like he wakes up and he's like, "Where am I?" And they're like, "Oh, you're in a game. We purchased your brain, we chopped it up, and we uploaded your mind. So this is where you live now, and you have to go on these missions. And if you don't complete them, you're just going to be deleted." So in this first 30%, he is basically in this gray room. He has an AI, not assistant, but like an evaluator, who can give him some information as he progresses, but not a ton. And he just goes through these doors and he goes on a bunch of missions. And honestly, they seem unrelated until later on in the story. But I kind of like that episodic aspect of it because it allowed, at least to me, a nice variety of almost short story experiences in this gamified zombie apocalypse. I thought the variety was quite nice. Once the world mode opens up about the 30% mark, the story begins to feel more like a traditional zombie apocalypse story. And that's totally true. Once world mode opens up, it's basically he has to go into the zombie apocalypse world for at least a full 8 hours every single day. He can come back to like the gray room, like the waiting screen kind of area, if he wants to, but he can also stay in that zombie apocalypse world full time if he chooses to. But he has to at least be there 8 hours a day. So that kind of gives you the feel of him constantly in the same areas, and that's why it gives that more traditional zombie apocalypse feel. Again, there are RPG mechanics though, like he gets XP for killing zombies. He can use that XP for upgrading himself, like stats, or for purchasing weapons when he goes back to the like gray waiting room, or for a variety of other things later on, like some town building, city building stuff. Most of the story focuses on the main character trying to create a safe place in the world for people to resettle. There are, again, some town building game mechanics come into play, resource management stuff. I enjoyed it. But like any good zombie apocalypse story, there's two sources of tension. One, from the threat of monsters attacking. That is more emphasized in like the first 30% when it does the episodic adventures. After that, after the open world mode works out, is opened up, that is lessened a little bit as the story focuses on him building community and trying to recruit new people to come into that community. And so the tension then shifts to potential threats from humans. It's kind of the way The Walking Dead works. The zombies are always going to be a threat, and that's can be a source of tension and excitement. But the other source of tension is going to be the people, who can be just as dangerous or threatening as the zombies themselves. And so that definitely exists in this particular story as well. There's plenty of internal drama from the groups of survivors. There are a few things I would have enjoyed seeing in this story. One is mostly the variety of survivors, especially towards like the middle of the story. Things feel a little, I don't want to say repetitive, but there is a lack of new people, and if you read the story, you'll see exactly why. Like the people from the earlier adventures, they might or might not make appearances later on in the story, but you're not going to see like a ton of entirely new people. There are a few, but not a lot. And to me, that was a missed opportunity. Story was, again, especially towards the middle of the story. Towards the end, things change a little bit, but overall, I had a really good time reading the story. It was a nice shift from just fantasy novels, and I totally read the entire thing in one sitting, which says good things about it to me. I'm definitely looking forward to reading book 2 in the series. Rapture, Apocalypse Gates, Author Cut, book 1 gets a firm 7 out of 10 for me, so I enjoyed it. So there you go. Okay, next is Mira and Zorro, Stuck in a Game World Vampire Wrath Incubus issue, a LitRPG fantasy fun novel. Super long title for the novel. It is 142 pages, $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited, so be aware of that. I'll read you the author's description. Everything is a game. Why not play around with millions of lives? Mira Flask was in the middle of a grand experiment with the help of the greatest virtual reality game, Hail, in history, where we're going to feel, hear, and explore more worlds than they ever imagined. Mira planned to use the power of the games to create a human revolution. The way of learning will never be the same. Now, if only her brother could stop playing around and keep it in his pants. Zero Flash just wanted to play hard and party harder. His sister was serious enough for the both of them. Someone had to loosen up. Doesn't the great family business need heirs or something? Life would have been normal. Kill brothers and bug sisters and try not to think about the hard things anymore. The siblings have been through too much to care. As long as they have each other, then that was enough. Hail was going to be Mira's latest obsession, her legacy, until a so-called game god, sucked them all into Hail and a million other people's whose talents he felt worthy enough to plug into his own experiment. Strength, beauty, medicine, dancing, math, crafting, origami, whatever was a talent was used to select his chosen ones to test the limit. Suddenly, Mira and Zoro are forced to play hard just to survive and try to reunite. Well, if Mira could stop getting targeted by ogres and idiots, I'm not a hero. If Zoro could stop crying in a corner, I can't believe Incubus. Wait, what? You want me to what? Again, this is just what it's written, folks. Kind of gives you a clue as to the type of writing. I'll continue. If the god game would stop messing around, now this is interesting. I should talk to the king. Okay, that's kind of enough. That's all, honestly, in the novel description on Amazon. And just from those little samples, you can tell the level of writing that this is. That same type of writing is throughout the entire novel. Okay, the review portion is basically, this is overpriced entirely. For $2.99, it's not worth it. It's not a Kindle Unlimited, so it's really not. I mean, to me at least. The first 12% of the novel it's okay. It's really it's pretty decent. I like the parody of the overbearing sister trying to get her rich brother to be responsible while she plays a new virtual reality game for research. It's a nice idea. It's a really nice beginning to the story. And again, I personally could overlook the grammar and spelling issues because it was fairly interesting. But then things after that 12% mark just kind of go blah. I mean, the two are randomly teleported to game worlds, transformed into their game characters, and story-wise, it just falls apart and it loses coherency. And my interest, unfortunately. As a fantasy story, this would be an okay thing, I guess. It really does take a lot of tropes from other novels and other like anime and manga stories and kind of mushes them into a virtual reality game world. But it really does having minimal amount of RPG mechanics, and that's probably one of my bigger issues with the story. It's just that, not that it's not like amazing, that's fine, it is what it is, but that it does say LitRPG, and for me that does imply that there should be some RPG mechanics in there and some character progressions, and to the extent that it's in the story, there are a couple of character sheets and a couple of levels gained. So technically, yeah, I guess LitRPG, but most of the story is just Portal Fantasy with a video game theme. And again, there are some parodies of other tropes, maybe from some manga and anime, concepts. But it wasn't particularly entertaining for me. It was just kind of a mess storyline. And again, at the time of the review, the story is $2.09 for like 140 pages, and it's not Kindle Unlimited. It's just really not worth the price for me. It gets a score of 5 out of 10. Just wasn't particularly entertaining. So there you go. Okay, next review. This one's on to the Lewd Shadowmancer, the Concubine Contract, written by Eden Red. Eden Red. I'll go with Red. Okay, this one is 270 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited, very nicely priced. I'll read you the author's description. First of all, she warns that the tale you're about to read is a story of sexual creatures, humans and otherwise. The tale is for adults 18 years old and up. So, forewarned, there's sex, the graphic sex. Okay, the author's description. Can becoming a villain change who you are? Nathan's life has been a vile pit for longer than he would like to admit. Searching for an escape, he spends the last of his cash on a VR game called Lewd Saga. Lewd Saga is a virtual MMORPG based in the fantasy world of Lucan, home of dragon royalty, human kingdoms, and troll masters. Players quest, grow their abilities, join in great battles, and find love and lust in whatever form they desire. There is no taboo, too great or too intimate. Upon entering the VR world, the player soon discovers he doesn't have to live by society's rules any longer. He quickly realizes players will pay real money to exact revenge on other players. Nathan, who feels like life took everything from him, can now carve out his destiny and make those who ever crossed him know his dark power. Will Nathan succumb to his darkness when there are greater evils trying to infect the virtual fantasy world? Will the love of another breathe life into his cynical heart? Will he question if he is the true villain or something else? Those are a lot of promises, and not all of them are really fulfilled, but it's a good description. Again, warning, there are graphic sex scenes in here, so just be aware of that when you're going into it. If you don't like them, you can either skip them when you read or just not pick this one up, because they're definitely a part of the story. Okay, this first 6% of the novel is a woe is me section of the story, where the main character has a kind of a pity party for himself after he gets himself fired for being late to work again. There is an aspect to it where he's determined to get revenge against his boss because his boss tried to blackmail him by trying to take part of his paycheck in exchange for not firing for being late again. So there is that. Instead, the main character goes home and he creates a troll Shadowmancer, and he's determined to find each of his ex fellow employees and his former jerk boss and make their lives miserable in this fantasy virtual reality game. Okay, some people are going to have a problem with the graphic sex scenes in the story. Personally, I just skip those parts. My biggest problem with the story is the lack of logic in it, especially on the gaming side of things. The author stated in several Facebook groups that this was her really good attempt at making like a crunchy lit RPG with tons of numbers and game mechanics. And in some respect, cool. There's a lot more numbers in this one than there are in other books that she's written. So that she made a good effort. Unfortunately, even though the numbers are there and they're consistent and they're throughout the entire novel, to me they didn't make sense in the actual story. Like, they didn't represent actual change or logic in the story. Like, it seemed like very much throughout the novel that at the drop of the hat, the game stuff was dropped in favor of making an entertaining story. And that's an author's choice. I'm not just putting that way in way, shape, or form. It's just that if you're going to have all those numbers, they need to have a correlation to the story. Like, you can't just abandon them whenever the story kind of calls for it. That kind of defeats the purpose of having them in the first place, to me at least, as a reader. And so it was very frustrating for me to see that disconnect between those two concepts. And I'll give you an example. Very early on in the story, when the main character first creates his troll Shadowmancer, it's a fresh character. Like, he's literally just out of the creation screen. He has a strutter knife, and he's looking for trouble. He's in a bad mood. He enters the player versus player zone, and he sees a group of knights and paladins defeating their opponents in a PvP zone. I mean, even hears them talk about how high, how these characters about how expensive the gear is and how powerful the items are, and yet the main character with his starter dagger and his low stats happens to be able to free the lone surviving unarmed Catwoman and defeat the entire group without dying, and that just didn't make sense in my mind. Additionally, after that, moments after he defeats them, when a group of archers almost kills him. Archers, bows and arrows, almost kill him. He's magically saved by groups of wraiths, so like undead spirits. Why? Why did they do it? They say just because we felt like you were one of us, and it kind of comes out of left field. So just this whole first scene feels very wand wavy to me. I mean, game logic wise, sure, the knights took off their armor, so they should be more vulnerable. But it just still doesn't make sense. The logic that a level 1 character with a starter knife could defeat higher level players who have expensive PvP gear just doesn't make sense to my brain as a gamer and like logic wise. And of course the save afterwards, just the magic wand saving from the other players with the undead, just made less sense to me. And that's just kind of a perfect example of how there's a disconnect between like the numbers that are real, because the author's very definitely putting the effort in creating the stat sheet and showing off the character's stats, skills, abilities, all that stuff there. But then once the story kind of calls for it to be ignored, and so as far as like the game logic goes in this particular situation, and then a bunch later on, it was very easy to just like, oh, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm just going to write the story to make it interesting. And then, again, that's just a story choice. I'm not criticizing that in particular. I'm just saying for my brain, as like my gamer brain logic and my math brain logic, it's like that these two things don't match. And I can't help the way that I feel. And story wise, the story is okay. Like it's almost good on its own. It gets a 6 out of 10 for me. Because there are some really interesting themes in there about redemption, what is evil, like revenge stuff in there. That's kind of neat. Good action stuff. All that's really nice. It's just that, again, there are so many just like semi-magical saves in the story where it's just like, oh, the character's in a bad situation and they can't, if he dies at this point, it kind of ruins things. So it's like, oh, wand waving, and it's fairly regular, even up to like the very, very end of the novel. And to me, that just hurts my brain, unfortunately. And I can't help the way that I feel. Overall, again, apart from the game mechanics and logic issues, the story is not bad. It's a tale of revenge with some themes about a digital addiction and corruption, which are kind of cool. It's just that those semi-regular saves, even to the story, make it hard to read for me. If you like graphic text scenes in your LitRPG, this might be the series for me. Like the author really just kind of specialized in this particular series in combining those two things. So good on specializing. However, if you just don't expect like the game stuff to make sense, and be prepared for like magic wand waving, or what is it called, plot armor to some people in the story on a fairly regular basis. The story gets, again, a 6 out of 10 on its own. Not bad, just not cool for me. On the game side though, it gets a 4 out of 10, unfortunately, just because, again, there's a definite disconnect between the numbers and what's actually happening in the story, and that's unfortunate. So it gets a score overall of a 5 out of 10. So that's going to be a 5 out of 10 for the Lewd Shadowmancer, the Concubine Contract, a dark fantasy digital adventure. Okay, on to our next review. Super Sales on Superheroes, Book 2, written by William D. Arand. Okay, this one is 382 pages, $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. In a world full of superpowers, Felix had a pretty crappy one. After learning to harness his abilities to modify any item he owns, he now runs a corporation that is rapidly expanding, Legion. After tangling with the local superheroes guild, they finally settled into a semblance of stability. Sounds great on paper. Run your company, make money, be your own boss, settle down. except that with running businesses comes an inordinate amount of responsibilities. Let's make sure everything keeps running and your people are paid. Worrying about the longevity of his company, Felix begins to expand into other cities. So they packed up the car, put in all the requisite forms, got the approvals, and set out to start Legion up in a new city. The problem, though, is the local government had no idea who they were selling permits to, approving forms for, to Felix and Legion, and now they're about to find out. So there you go. Basically, Legion is moving to a new city, and that's essentially what that says. And honestly, I like the story in general. It's just that the first 50% is I'm not as big a fan of. The last half of the novel, the last 50%, is seriously action packed. It kind of rocks for me. It's just that first half, it brings in a lot of stuff that I'm just not a fan of, or as big a fan, I should say. Like, I like the characters. Everybody's really fun. The small bits of action in there are cool. It's just that let's see. Yes, the last half brings a couple plotlines that aren't fully developed, but there's a lot of answer questions. Yeah, okay, so it's interesting last half. Okay, I'll begin with the things I really loved about book one. Again, in book one, I liked the RPG mechanics. The magical upgrade points are really well utilized. And at the beginning of book one, Felix had to carefully manage his upgrade points and plan how to best use those upgrades. It was a really fine balancing act, and if he made a mistake, his budding business might go under in book one. And so there was always that tension, like him having to be resource management aware, at least, in the story. And that is kind of gone from the entire novel. And it's just a consequence of the story evolving, and it's a natural progression. So I'm not saying it's not, like it doesn't make sense. It's just that I kind of missed that particular aspect of it. Like him having to be careful with his upgrade points. For the most part, Felix is no longer, the main character no longer has to worry about his daily allotted upgrade points. He just doesn't, or really any resource for that matter. Relative to book one, Felix barely uses his powers because he has a huge pool of renewed resources to basically do whatever he wants with. Again, he's a little overpowered at the beginning of book two. If he wants to build a university, sure, he can do that. If he wants to bribe his way into a government position, that is absolutely doable. And it's because Felix is so powerful at the beginning of the story that the stakes really feel lowered. It kind of feels like he can't lose in the first half of the story. And whether that's intentional or not, or it's just a progression of story, it is what it is. And it made it less enjoyable. And again, the first half was just a little harder for me to get through than the last half. And there were a couple of fights. However, most of that first half of the story deals with the business, with Legion. Felix's company is expanding to a new city, and he's dealing with the hurdles of trying to gain a foothold there. There's politics, there's intrigue, there's company expansion problems, there's recruitment stuff. And honestly, it feels a little too big for me. And this is just personal preference. There's just so many people asking for the main characters and the reader's attention that the story feels a little overcrowded. But if you like intrigue, if you like politics in your story, if you like that kind of stuff, then you're really going to love the first half of this novel. It's just that it's not my thing. But at the 50% mark in the novel, things definitely shift. When the novel's villain is revealed and some weird stuff starts to happen, the novel really does go in some very interesting directions. The novel finally focuses on some very specific threats and events in the story. And that to me was good, in my opinion, because now it feels like there's a purpose to the story once again. Even if some of those plot lines feel like they come out of left field, they were at least interesting to me, and I like that. And again, there's tons of good action in the second half of the story. Overall, it's a good read. It really is. I just liked book one more, and that will be the case in a lot of stories. Book ones are always the ones that people enjoy the most, but it's still a very fun read. But again, if you loved the RPG stuff in book one, be aware that it exists in the novel, but there's a lot less of it, just because there are other things that the author and the story is focusing on. So just as an FYI, the novel gets a 7 out of 10 for me. Again, that's Super Sales and Superheroes book 2 with a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to the Twilight Obelisk Mirror World book 4, written by A. Ozochuk. There we go. Okay, this one is 435 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'm going to double check that because that doesn't seem quite right. Nope, sorry, it is not available on Kindle Unlimited. So I am correct. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited. So there you go. Most of these from the world aren't usually available on Kindle Unlimited. So I'll have to change that particular aspect of the review before I forget. Okay, this one is again, Olgard and his tribal NPC gang have finally discovered the Forbidden City. Unfortunately, they haven't found where they were looking for. The ancient maps are hopelessly out of date, and the capital city is lying in ruins. There we go. In the meantime, their enemies are closing in. Nocturne hordes are arriving in the Silver Mountain Valley. The Dark Army has already crossed the Brack Stream, and the forces of light have already entered the Icy Woods. So bad guys are coming in. The magic protecting the sphere which Olgar received from the city's invisible guardians is about to expire. The only way he can save the lives of his trusty NPC friends is by activating the Twilight Obelisk. So there you go. Okay. For the most part, this is a really good extension of the series. Everything's really coherent in the novel. If you're a fan of this series, this is definitely a good book. I enjoyed it personally. I'm vamping a little bit just because I lost my place in my review thing, so sorry about that. Okay. Full disclosure, I got an advanced copy for review. I purchased the novel when it was released. Personally, the things I liked with the story the most are probably going to be the pet raising and the upgrade stuff. I thought they were really neat, a nice addition to the story. There are the usual translation snags and odd phrases and awkward things in there. Nothing that ruins the story, but it almost gives the novel an accent to places. One of my favorite translation snags is definitely one in the story about midway through. The main character is being attacked by an old nemesis from like book 1, and he's recalling what that bad guy's dad said about him. He's like, "I never taught him to bow his head to any Tom, Dick, or Harry." And then Olgard's response, and he says basically, "Very well, I might be a regular dick, but I wasn't going to run from him this time." And I'm like, and it kind of made me giggle just because of the way it's phrased. I'm like, that's definitely a translation issue where they're trying to use like American phrases. And it just didn't work out correctly. It's a small thing, but it made me laugh, and that kind of reflects some of the writing in the story. There's just a ton of little nods to fun things and adventure and action. And I guess most of all, it's a coherent continuation of the series. There's tons of action and adventure. However, there's probably one thing that I wasn't a huge fan of. The end of the novel. It kind of has a twist that I'm not really sure how to feel about personally. In a lot of ways, it makes a lot of the plot of the entire series seem kind of meaningless, but it also wraps up the story. And I think this is informed by the author's position of where he was at in his life over the series when he wrote this novel. The author previously stated that this book was going to be the last book in this series. He's since changed his mind. He intends to write more in it. But I think the end of this particular story is informed by the idea that he intended it to be the last book at the time of the writing. The twist at the end doesn't ruin things in any way, shape, or form, but I kind of found myself caring less, like the last 15% of the novel, because of what occurs about the 85% mark. Overall, though, it's a really good. It's a good story. I had a good time reading it. If you again enjoyed the other 3 in the series, again, excluding kind of the end, enjoyable story for me at least. It gets a score of 7 out of 10. Again, that's Twilight Obelisk, Mira World Book 4, with a score of 7 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, on to our next novel review. Written by Arthur Stone. It is The Gods of the Second Wind, which is the Weirdest Noob Book 3. Okay, this one is 304 pages, $5.92, not available on Kindle Unlimited. The author's description. One player has managed to upset the game's ruled balance, and now he's hunted by everyone. Every clan wants to recruit him for his achievements, while other powers want him for their own, more sinister purposes. Now Ross must contend against an unseen enemy backed by the world's most powerful corporation, while relying on only himself and his few trusted allies. The stakes have never been higher. Don't miss the final book in the Weirdest Noob trilogy. So yep, that's right, this is the final book in this particular series. Just a quick heads up. There's an issue where the wrong version of the story was uploaded and sent to the folks that pre-ordered the novel. The company that translates the novel quickly moved to fix the issue and upload the correct file, but there are still a lot of negative reviews on Amazon based upon that early version, which is not the correct version. So just heads up when you're like looking at the Amazon reviews. Again, this is 304 pages. It is $5.92, a bit on the expensive side. It is also not available on Kindle Unlimited, so be aware that that is the case. Okay, again, the final book in the Weirdest Noob series is unfortunately my least favorite in the series as well, and that makes me sad. And there are a couple of big points to this. One is that a lot of the novel, especially the first half of it, feels like filler. And while there are some interesting plot twists, the end feels rushed, and it's kind of a disappointment because it's like, oh, it's the end of the story. Let's tie things up and bam, 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 bam. And that's how it feels, unfortunately. Most of the story revolves around the main character, Ross, running around from forces that are trying to kill him both in the game and in the real world. However, along the way, he's aided by a mysterious force that seems to have been guiding him the entire series. The novel culminates in a big showdown between these two forces. There you go. Unfortunately, this is kind of the end. That showdown is rather disappointing. It amounts to some magic wand waving from both sides saying, here's my biggest weapon. No, here's my biggest weapon. And this, and then just one of them losing for no real reason. And it was kind of a letdown. You can read the details in the novel. Overall, the action and crafting and adventure in the novel were good. What was there is great. But there's also a lot of filler. And what I mean by filler is basically there's a lot of exposition, or there's a lot of places in the story where the main character is just thinking about stuff or explaining game concepts that have absolutely nothing to do with the immediate events with the events happening around him at that moment. And just these long like paragraphs of like concepts about raid theory and game theory and like why player versus player happens in a certain way. And it's like, it just felt like it was unnecessary for a lot of, again, mostly in the beginning and the first half of the novel. If you're an uber fan of the series, you might like the novel. I was a little disappointed. It's not a bad novel in any way, shape, or form. It certainly isn't boring. It's just that, okay, it's again, just my least favorite. For me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10. Again, that's The Gods of the Second World, LitRPG, The Weirdest Noob, Book 3. It gets a score of 6 out of 10. So slightly disappointing. So there it is. Okay, on to our next story. Okay, this one is a Dungeon Soul, LitRPG novel. Book 3 in the Adventures on Brad by Tao Wong. It is 161 pages, $3.99. Also not available on Kindle Unlimited. This is one of those weird episodes where quite a few are just not on Kindle Unlimited for whatever reason. So there we go. I'll read you the author's description. The car-like dungeon has reopened with a brand new configuration. A whole new dungeon awaits Daniel and Asen. Joined by Omark, the party races to be the first to complete the dungeon, but must face new monsters, new traps, and new floor layouts, where the adventurers complete the new dungeon in time. A Dungeon Soul's traditional fantasy story filled with RPG elements. So there you go. This is a really simple review. This novel is a dungeon crawl. It's in line with the previous 2 novels in the series. That's all it ever says it's going to be. It's a dungeon crawl story. The dungeon at Karlach is open again, but has been changed. There's a huge reward for the first team to complete all 10 levels, and our favorite team is competing against a group of advanced dungeoneers to win. New to the team is a hulking barbarian. He's that middle guy in that cover art picture. There are a few places for character development in the story, but it's pretty much a straightforward dungeon dive novel. Don't expect more. I had a good time with it. There's plenty of action. The dungeon diving is interesting. There's a more variety of monsters and types of dungeon levels. So it was entertaining in that respect, but that's kind of what it is. Just be aware of your expectations and you'll probably have a good time like I did. It's not in Kindle Unlimited. It's priced at $3.99 for 161 pages. It's not my favorite in the series. That's what it comes down to, I guess. The books 1 and 2 had side plots in the story. Like there were secondary plots that made the dungeon crawling make a little more sense. This one just not. It was really just straightforward. He's in town, dungeon. He might go do other things like volunteer at the clinic or heal some other players or get new equipment and whatever. upgrade his abilities and skills, but it's basically dungeon dive, slight break, dungeon dive, etc. And so, if that's, like I said, that part of it was well done. It's just that there's not much to it besides that. And so this one's just not as good to me as the other two. It gets a score of 6 out of 10. So again, that's A Dungeon Soul, Book 3 of the Adventures on Brad. Score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. The author was also said that he's taking a break from the series. I assume he's going to be writing in his Apocalypse series or something else as well. So just an FYI. Okay, on to the last review of the podcast. Infinite Assassins, Daggerland Online, Novel 2, a LitRPG adventure, written by Peter Meredith, an Amazon bestseller. So there you go. Okay, it is 412 pages, $2.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. 2 weeks before the trial of Atticus Arching, his radical followers, the Infinite Assassins, decide to take the law into their own hands. Using the bodies of innocent online players, these unkillable assassins target the entire prosecution team, including the only witness in the case, FBI Special Agent Daniel Rowan. Escaping by the skin of his teeth, Rowan is forced to go on the run. Hounded day and night by the assassins, he finds the only way he can strike back is to go online and infiltrate the very group that's after him. The only problem is that they only take the very coldest of killers, and Rowan is forced to become everything he hates: liar, thief, murderer, and assassin. There are a few things that the author has blurbs about, people saying about it. Okay, I'm kind of torn on this one, mostly because if I think of it in two different ways, I have different opinions about it, and I'll get to those. The setup of the story is both interesting and annoying, and again, that's part of it. That the bad guy from book 1 has arranged to murder everyone involved in his conviction is kind of neat. It's very Kingpin, in my opinion. However, that the main character in the story, Daniel Rowan, has to go back into the game to investigate it is equally annoying. It just doesn't make sense to me. The premise kind of relies upon the fact that every police department, every FBI agent, anybody involved in the investigation is just bad at their jobs. Like, there's no evidence apparently in this entire thing, no evidence digitally or physical that's going to tie anybody to these murders. And so the main character's like, I have to go back into the game to investigate, and like, it just doesn't make sense. Putting that to the side though, because that's just how the main character gets into the novel. The action fantasy adventures from the novel is rather good. Good pacing. This novel did a much better job over book 1 in pacing the story. There's no dumb noob section in here where everybody's figuring how things work out and they keep dying repeatedly. That all is gone. So the pacing of the story is definitely improved. The action definitely progresses on a very good level. All that stuff is done really well. The main character goes into Daggerland as a rogue with the alignment of lawful evil. He finds, however, that his thoughts are influenced by the game immediately, and he starts to do things he would never normally do in real life. The longer the game goes on, the more evil he becomes. And while I personally don't like how the character develops, because in book 1, he's definitely the lady right hero dude. And it's just such a shift to see him be evil in this novel. And he becomes really super evil. Like, he does a lot of things that most people are going to consider bad, like mutilating people, murder, torture, that not only goes from the game, but also into real life in the story eventually. And that those decisions just seem so out of character from the story that I knew in book 1. So I didn't like that particular development personally. Other people are going to enjoy the villain story, I guess. I just wasn't, that particular aspect wasn't particularly appealing to me. However, I will admit that I like the sci-fi concept of a game changing the minds of its players. I thought it's a very interesting idea. However, it does also reek of like an excuse for bad behaviors, and then, oh, the game made me do it. That kind of justifies the main character's evil deeds. I would have rather seen him just take ownership of it and say, I'm choosing to do these things to further the cause. The goal matters, not the way he gets there, kind of thing. But that's not the way this goes down. So it is what it is. On the downside of the story, things I didn't enjoy as much, the RPG mechanics, they're super minimal compared to book 1. Essentially what you see in the novel is character sheets on a fairly regular basis, and XP gain notifications. That's kind of it. I mean, it's it is reality. Even the XP notifications are kind of ignored in the story, and I almost got the feeling that they were added in post. After the rest of the real story had kind of been written, someone went back to the story and just added a bunch of experience notifications for things like combat or doing particular things, and added in like the advancements in level and the character sheets. That's just my particular impression of it, and that's just. Most of the story in the game part feels like it's more of a fantasy action story. Like there's very few regular references to anything game related. They're there, but again, they're very occasional. Most of the text in the story, as far as the game portions go, feel very like it's a portal fantasy story. Like the main character was transported to a new world and he interacts with all the characters in a very fantasy like way. None of them have like NPC names or act like NPCs in any shape or form. It's very, it just feels like a fantasy story. And just because there are just very rare occasional like references to like the main character even remembering, oh, this is a game and I have to do this game thing or an investigation. And it's just like 90% of the story just feels like a fantasy action story. And for some people, that's going to be good. Some people really would rather read a novel with like strong action fantasy and occasional game stuff. Me, I'm not that kind of person. I love the game stuff. I love the details. I love the numbers that are there are completely accurate and they're consistent. I'm not saying they're not. It's just that they're super minimal and you can tell. And that's just an author choice. I respect that. It's just that for me, it didn't fulfill really that LitRPG vibe that I love. Book 1 had a lot more game mechanics in there and a lot more information about them. So that is what it is. Let's see. Like book 1, the detective aspect of the story said at the beginning of the novel practically doesn't exist. And again, this is something that was in book 1. It's also in book 2. Again, much of the story feels like a straight fantasy portal fiction with occasional mentions of game stuff and also detective stuff. The detective stuff in book 1 was practically non-existent, unfortunately. And in book 2, it's also the same. Most of the in-game stuff is basically the main character going on these action adventure things with rogue stuff, assassin stuff, killing, murder, theft, recruiting other characters, etc. And again, all that stuff is really well written. It's just that it kind of feels like it's almost two different novels in a lot of different places. One is a fantasy action story, and one is a detective story that's kind of inserted occasionally, or in like the real life sections. Definitely, that's an emphasis there. But the two don't always mix. And that's just my particular impression of it, unfortunately. Overall, again, the fantasy action parts of the story are really well written. Game mechanics are consistent. It is absolutely LitRPG. It's just that those game mechanics aren't particularly special, and they're definitely minimized in this particular novel. For me, the detective aspects of the story are a complete disappointment, as is the direction the main character develops in. So especially at the end, which is super frustrating to read because I'm like, that doesn't seem like the kind of ththings that this main character would do if it's the same main character from book 1. Again, that's my opinion. I didn't have as great a time with this one as I did in book 1. Well, it gets the same score, just for different reasons, I should say. Infinite Assassins Daggerland Online Novel 2 gets a score of 6 out of 10 for me. So there you go. Not boring. It's just like there were issues that stopped it from being good for me, at least. So there you go. Okay, that's it for the show, folks. Thank you very much for listening, for watching. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Patreon. And of course, if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. Again, thanks to a lot of everybody for hanging out with me. I know it's been a tough week for a lot of people with the trademark stuff that came up, but remember, there are also a lot of other great things in the world and the LitRPG community that have come up, like babies being born and new novels that have come out. I always encourage you to try to strengthen the community, be supportive of everybody who's a writer and a reader, because this community is important to us. I know it is to me. At this point, I spend most of my days developing, reading, writing in the community for people. So my life is kind of here in the LitRPG community, and I know a lot of other people feel very similarly. So be nice, be supportive of everybody as you can, as much as possible. So that's it, folks. Thanks for hanging out with me until we can hang out again. And remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.